Mitch.
They love their Cougars.
Mitch Harper.
Good afternoon, Cougar Nation, and welcome into another edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast here on KSLSports.com, KSL Sports Facebook, KSL Sports YouTube, KSL Sports Twitter. Wherever you're watching or listening to the podcast, appreciate you stopping on by. I'm your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mitch_Harper. Follow KSL Sports on all the social media platforms as well. So here's what we got on deck for today's edition of the podcast. It's a Friday. It's a fabulous Friday, getting you ready for the weekend. NFL draft is in action. BYU is going to have Tyler Algier. He's going to be selected in the draft probably on Saturday in the fourth round is my expectation, but he could sneak in tonight on Friday in that third round. But after Algier, there's probably not going to be another draft pick. So I'm looking ahead to 2023, a way too early look at BYU's top 2023 NFL draft prospects. And there's already one guy getting buzz as a first round pick. I'll discuss that and a whole lot more. Also, the Big 12 Conference, they're going to be meeting next week coming up. So what's the latest on the divisions, the structure of the new Big 12, TV deals? I'll hit on some of that as the Big 12, that new Big 12 Conference, is beginning to form. We'll start things off, though, real quick with a basketball update. Rudi Williams, the Coastal Carolina guard, who completed his official visit to BYU earlier in the week. I caught up with him, exchanged some messages with him. He's really impressed with BYU's coaching staff. He loves the authenticity of this staff. He feels that they're going to be a group that, I think that he came away very impressed with his BYU visit. They did some Topgolf. They just had a pretty good time in Provo. He's down at Montezuma Mesa right now at San Diego State. That's going to be his final visit before he makes the decision on where he's going to go. And I think right now, BYU's in the lead. I thought BYU left a definite impression on Rudi Williams. And you got to remember, Rudi Williams, the 12th best three-point shooter in college basketball per Ken Pomeroy's three-point percentage ratings. I know it's a mouthful, but Rudi Williams can knock down the three. And I was talking with him about that, and he just said worked at a lot of live game situations to improve his craft, and he feels like he's a confident three-point shooter. So he would be a nice get for BYU, Rudi Williams. The Cougars did lose out on Frederick King, a high school prospect from the NBA Latin America Academy. What's the deal? Walter Ruiz, former BYU guy. Got to help BYU out, getting Frederick King to BYU. No, instead, Frederick's going to Creighton. So he's going to be playing in the Big East Conference, and BYU plays the Blue Jays, in another neutral site game coming up this season in Las Vegas. So BYU will get the chance to see Frederick King. And then finally, on the basketball side of things, Antoine Davis, the prolific scorer from Detroit, he's on his official visit right now. They had dinner last night at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in Salt Lake City, downtown Salt Lake, near my old employer back in the day. And a little bit of a step up from the Sean East dinner pictures. There was some creeper photo that leaked of the coaching staff with Sean East at Buffalo Wild Wings. A little bit of a step up going to Ruth's Chris for Antoine Davis. When you're talking about a top 25 all-time scorer in college basketball, you gotta bring out the money. You gotta show that fine dining experience to try to woo away Antoine Davis. BYU, one of the top 5 schools for Davis, who's just one heck of a scorer and someone that can fill it up in bunches. He would be a huge get for BYU. That's the latest on BYU basketball. We'll have more over the weekend as things continue to move out and move and shake. And keep in mind, too, with basketball and football as well, players that want to have that one-time waiver to transfer, they've got to do it either today or tomorrow. Tomorrow being Saturday, April 30th. The deadline is May 1st to get that one-time waiver in. If you submit your name into the transfer portal on Monday, May 2nd, you're out of luck. You're not going to be able to play next year. So something to keep in mind. So it feels like The pieces that BYU's got on the roster are pretty much in place. There still could be some moving and shaking there as far as players that, maybe don't have that one-time waiver as an option. Who knows? We'll see what ends up happening. But the guys that have the one-time waiver in place, those guys, like you think about a Fusini Traore, Atiki, Ali Atiki, those type of guys, they're locked in, they're in place, and those are going to be some foundational pieces for BYU next year and beyond. The NFL draft, I talked about it earlier. First off, I got to say, this year's draft, what an underwhelming first round, right? I mean, the personnel at the top of the draft, I just thought, this is the NFL draft in 2022. Like, Jacksonville's pick, does it not scream Anthony Bennett to anyone else? He's the NFL version of Anthony Bennett. Remember, Anthony Bennett was the UNLV guy who ends up going number 1 to the Cavs. Walker, I don't see it, man. I just don't. I know he's got elite athleticism. His spark rating is just off the charts. It's out of this world, the 99 percentile, his athleticism, his size, but it's like, he didn't dominate on film. And I know you're at Georgia and things like that, but you got to be the best of the best. When I think of number 1 overall picks, I'm thinking of alphas, guys that were just headliners in college football. You knew they were all-American caliber. Walker wasn't. So it was an unusual draft, I feel, because you look at the last time all these defensive picks went in the first 5 or 6 picks. That was 1991, and none of those guys in the 91 draft ended up being Hall of Famers or anything special. I think this was just a weak year. It was obviously a weak year for BYU as well, as they've got maybe 1 or 2 guys that could be drafted. James Empey could be there, Samson Nakua maybe, but most likely everyone's going to be undrafted free agents except for Tyler Algier. Next year, however, 2023, not only for BYU, but all of the entire NFL draft, the talent pool is far deeper. And I think in part, what played a role into that was the COVID year, some guys deciding to stay this past year. I think that it created a situation where this year's draft class was just weaker than usual. 2023 is going to be great, and it's going to definitely be good for BYU. And I think it starts off, obviously, with offensive lineman Blake Freeland, already getting some buzz as a potential first-round draft pick. Yeah, that's right. 24/7 Sports, they put out their way too early mock draft for 2023, and they had Blake Freeland checking in the top 25 picks. Freeland is a freak of nature. His story is what NFL scouts love when you're factoring in insane athlete, great measurables, best football still ahead of him. Blake Freeland has only played the offensive line position for 2.5 years. His first offensive line live game snaps were against Boise State in 2019. You guys all know that. But that's what I think the NFL loves when you're talking about freaky athlete, going to test well, got long arms. He's just got all the measurables. And then you got the production too, where he is protecting. He's not letting guys get by him. He is protecting Jaron Hall's blind side, and Blake Freeland, special football player. He's going to be a first rounder. He could come back in 2023 for the first year of the Big 12. But this is his 4th season. And again, I'm always of the belief that you got to go. You don't want to put out too much film. You still want a little bit of that mystery when you're talking about your NFL draft prospects. I think when teams just know completely what you are, you tend to trend down and you slide down draft boards. I remember Matt Reynolds back in the day, I think it was 2010, after his junior year, he opted to come back for his senior season. It was the wrong move. After his junior year, he could have been a first-round pick. After his senior year, he went undrafted. So I think that always just go. If the buzz is there, and I think it's definitely going to be there, as long as Blake Freeland stays healthy, he's going to be a first-round draft pick. He's a stud. Staying on that offensive line, too, Kalani Sitake, back in March at the Pro Day, he spoke with us in the media, and he even mentioned that the 2023 class, it's going to be loaded. He even pointed that out. He didn't mention specific names because obviously, again, guys could, come back for another year if they wish to do so. But Clark Barrington is another guy along the offensive line for BYU, a guard. You look at like the Pro Football Focus numbers on him over the years when he's been healthy. He's been outstanding. Clark Barrington, kind of like a Brady Christensen career trajectory where you would have never seen it coming when he signed at BYU. You would have thought, okay, like he's a developmental guy at best. He's going to be, if junior, senior year, if he cracks the 2 deep, great. But he just took off. That 2020 season, that Navy game, it was just like a coming out party. He started a little bit in 2019 and replaced Tristan Hodge. But Clark Barrington is a great talent as well. Not as high as Blake Freeland, because the interior lineman, it's not as much of a premium as the offensive tackle spot. But I think Clark Barrington's a 3rd or 4th round type talent. I think BYU's got a lot more NFL draft talents. And I think that's why you look at the 2022 season and there's a lot of reason for optimism and excitement about the prospects of this group because they have so many key personnel that could be NFL draft picks. And quarterback Jaren Hall is one of those guys. The quarterback room, their quarterback class in 2023 is going to be a heck of a lot better than this group in 2022. Kenny Pickett's your number 1 QB. I would have gone Malik Willis personally. I think Malik Willis is a guy that should have been top 10 in my opinion. I think he's worth that, but he slides out into day 2. There's just not much in this year's class. And I think the strength of the 2023 class probably is impacting a lot of the decisions when it comes to picking these quarterbacks early in the draft because 2023 is going to be a lot more loaded. You could get a Jaren Hall in the 2nd or 3rd round potentially. That guy's got 1st round talent, maybe. I mean, Jaren's still got room to grow. I'm not saying by any means is he a top 15 pick. I think he's probably still a day 2, early day 3 guy right now. You put more film on, and you know how teams evaluate some of the quarterbacks, or they'll reach on some QBs. I think Jaren could climb. I think he's just going to put up some massive numbers this season for BYU, and I think that he could have a climb. Maybe not to Zach Wilson standards, going number 2 overall, but I would not be surprised if we see Jaren Hall next year as a 1st round guy. I think that's a possibility with the type of talent that Jaren has, his athleticism. I mean, you saw the speed in that treadmill video. Dude has just elite top end speed, and then he's got good measurables. He's got good hand size too. There's a lot to like about Jaren Hall. Some other names real quick that I think are going to be NFL draft prospects. I think the next big one is Puka Nakua. I think he could be a 1st round guy as well. I think Puka, big time potential there if he has a big year this season. I think just, again, he's a measurables guy. I think still his best football is ahead of him for Puka Nakua. Chris Brooks from Cal, running back. Gunnar Romney, wide receiver. Tyler Batty, maybe defensive end, and that'd be more projection based. He's a little bit of an older prospect. He's going into his 3rd season this year at BYU. I think he should come back. I mean, but depending on what happens this year, if he's big time and he puts together, let's say, a 7-8 sack season this year, I think you got to consider it if you're Tyler Batty. Keenan Peely, Peyton Wilgar, Max Tooley, all 3 of the linebackers, I think, have NFL potential. And then the back end of the defense, Malik Moore, D'Angelo Mandel, Caleb Hayes. I'd also probably add maybe Jake Oldroyd too, but he's been inconsistent. If he's 2020 Jake Oldroyd, yeah, he's an NFL kicker. If he's 2021 or 2019 Jake Oldroyd, he's not an NFL kicker. But I think those are the top 2023 NFL draft prospects for BYU football next year. What do you think? Share your thoughts. You can comment in Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. That's one of the great things about these live streams is you can interact with me live throughout the show, and you can share your commentary throughout the program. As again, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we're going to be live streaming Cougar Tracks at high noon Mountain Time, Mondays, Wednesdays, Friday, throughout the off season, during the season. It's a new era of the Cougar Tracks podcast. It's also a new era for BYU athletics, and the Cougars obviously are getting ready for the Big 12 conference, and that's going to pose so many unique circumstances and challenges for BYU, but it's fun to see the growth of like just the signs, the indications that BYU is going to be joining the Big 12. Yesterday, Billy Nixon and the equipment staff put in the Floyd Johnson and Mick Hill equipment room that signage that Baylor gave to BYU indicating they're a Big 12 member. It's just, look, in this era of alliances in college athletics, it's good to be wanted or it's good to be respected. BYU has been going at college football for 10, 11 years now, and they've had no allies. No one. Yeah, they want to schedule them, but no allies. Now, the Big 12 Conference, at least on the surface right now, seem to be a good working relationship with all these universities. And Baylor especially, I think there's a lot to, enjoy right there if you're a BYU fan, that the fact that Baylor, who I think is going to be one of the flagship athletic departments in the new Big 12, is reaching out and being supportive of BYU in their transition. It'll be kind of fun to see what BYU does as far as hospitality goes for Baylor when they come out to Provo this fall, because I'll tell you, that was one of the best trips I've ever had covering a BYU football game, going to Waco. Baylor, the hospitality was just outstanding, to the fans, to the coaches, to the players, to the media, all the way down. I mean, Baylor was just class acts all around. They were great. They gave the media relations staff, gave food recommendations. They even went in so much detail worrying about, like, hey, do you guys drink caffeine? Like, they had a fridge designated with no caffeine. They just went all out to be supportive of BYU and pay respects to the nuances of BYU and the church. And I'm thinking, hey, look, we drink a ton of caffeine. You are going to learn a little bit about these soda shops and putting creamer in your Diet Cokes and we love caffeine. Don't get it twisted. That notion of LDS people don't like caffeine, that's a myth. That's a myth. We love that caffeine. BYU loves the Big 12 Conference. And the question now, though, is what's going to be the look, the makeup of that new Big 12? The presidents and ADs, they're all going to meet next week in the Big 12 Conference. And it should be kind of a deal where you're starting to rubber stamp the look of the new Big 12 Conference. And to me, I would go, if you're the Big 12 in this new iteration, you got to keep in mind, you're going to probably have a 14-team league starting in 2023 and then also in 2024. John Rothstein reported that a couple days ago, but that's been kind of known. That was reported back in January that there was an expectation that everyone was going to join. Even Kansas State's athletic director said that they expect all 14 teams in 2023. So that's no surprise there. For the first 2 years with Texas and Oklahoma involved, I would have, if I was in charge of the Big 12 Conference, I would have divisions for those first 2 years. Now, I'm anti-division. I don't think it's necessary in college football. I wish all conferences would scrap the divisions, because I hate how in college football we see some of these conference matchups, yet they don't play for 7, 8, 9 years. It's insane. Like Alabama and Georgia, they never play in the regular season. Yes, we see them in SEC title games. They never play in the regular season because of the dumb SEC scheduling requirements, because of the divisions. I don't want divisions after Texas and Oklahoma leave. But for the first 2 years, incorporate the divisions. Fine. And that way too, this sounds petty, but if you're the Big 12, you got to do it. You put Texas and Oklahoma in the same division, because the last thing you want is those two teams contending for a Big 12 championship against one another. You want one of the new Big 12 members facing Oklahoma or facing Texas or whoever it may be. Last year's Big 12 title game was great. Baylor and Oklahoma State. Perfect. I think that those first 2 years have 7-team divisions. But after Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC, I think you scrap the divisions altogether and you go with the best 2 teams in the Big 12 title game. That would be how I would structure it. But I get this feeling that they're going to go divisions and they're going to go with 9 conference games as well. The 9 conference games, I think the only incentive to that, honestly, is from a TV inventory perspective. You go to, in the upcoming TV contracts in 2025, you'll have more TV inventory with that ninth football game to sell to a Fox or an NBC or a CBS or an ESPN. You'll just have more inventory. Personally, I'd like to see the Big 12 go to 8 conference games and then have 4 non-conference games. And I say that because I think that the Big 12 conference, and it's not fair and it's not right, and I don't agree with it at all, because this is going to be a great league. It really is. It's going to be a high-value, entertaining football league and the best in basketball. But in football, they are going to face a perception battle. They just will. And from a competitive standpoint, 8 conference games, and then have 4 non-conference games, and then you go rewrite the narrative and the perceptions and go play these teams in the SEC, these teams in the Big Ten. You go play those teams. And I think the SEC, too, is an area where, you notice with the Alliance, ACC, Pac-12, Big Ten, they're going to, supposedly schedule one another. We'll see how that all shakes out. What about the SEC? They're going to still want some non-conference games, too, unless they completely go radical and create their own, playoff system and just play against each other. Who knows? But I got to think they're going to want some non-conference games, too. I wouldn't mind seeing some, more SEC, Big 12 matchups. I think there'd be some value there. I mean, they were in lockstep when it came to the vision of the playoff. Bowlesby and Greg Sankey, they were in lockstep with how they wanted to view that thing. I just think that, and also they have the SEC Big 12 basketball showcase. I think that, the perception thing, it's lame because this is going to be a great league. I really believe that. But we know sometimes perception wins the day more than actual results in college football. It's just the reality. It's a sad state of affairs that the sport is in, but the perception is already building. The Big 12 is inferior. Well, I completely disagree. I think it was Greg McElroy at the national championship or the college football playoff in Indy. He said something of, the new Big 12, you're not going to be able to differentiate that from the AAC. Okay. Are you kidding me? So you're telling me then that Oklahoma, the team that always just gets the benefit of the doubt and gets thrown into the college football playoff if they got a good record, they just been beating up on AAC teams all this time? Come on. It's silly, this narrative that's building about because Texas and Oklahoma are gone, the Big 12 is just suddenly this pile of just crap. It's not the case. It's going to be one of the most entertaining leagues out there. And I think that the Big 12, the new commissioner, whoever that ends up being, has to be a visionary and sell that on these TV networks that this is going to be the new entertaining college football league. You want to play on Thursdays, you want to play on Fridays. This is going to be the spot where the college football diehards love watching. Now, you want to still appease to that mainstream sports fan because I think college football junkies will always watch. But to get that mainstream sports fan, if you got high-level play, I think this league will have it. And I just think that, next week when they have those meetings to discuss that new Big 12 conference, probably going to be 9 games, probably going to be divisions. But I hope after the first 2 years, which is Texas and Oklahoma, they scrap those divisions because that is not needed. You need your best 2 teams in the Big 12 championship game in 2025 and beyond. Because I believe still that the college football playoff will expand to 12. Even Jack Swarbrick said as much in an interview with Sports Illustrated, that it will eventually get to 12. And you get a Big 12 champion, and you get the 2 best teams in the Big 12 championship, you'll get your champion in the field of 12. You might be able to get your at-large team as well, too. So I think there's bright days ahead for the Big 12 Conference. Looking forward to seeing how it all shakes out in the new Big 12. Let's get to some of your questions. Nathan Jones would love to see BYU switch to the Jordan brand to start the Big 12 era. I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind seeing the Jordan brand. Personally, I'd like to see Adidas. I know I'm wearing a Nike shirt right now, but I wouldn't mind seeing Adidas. That's just me personally. I know BYU's just in love with Nike. That's Nike, only the swoosh. That's the end-all, be-all for BYU. They've had a relationship with Nike dating back to the early days with Phil Knight. late 70s, early 80s. I think BYU, they struck a deal with Nike in 1979 with LaVell Edwards, I want to say. They've been with Nike forever. They're going to stay with Nike forever. But Jordan Brand would be cool. It'd be cool to have Jordan cleats. That would be pretty cool. You can always share your comments on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, live streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon Mountain Time here on Cougar Tracks. I hope you guys are enjoying this new era of Cougar Tracks. I know I am. It's a lot of fun. I think that this is going to be a blast during the football season and covering all the latest with BYU sports. There's only 18 weeks from tomorrow. 18 weeks. BYU, South Florida, going to kick it off in Tampa at the new Sombrero, and we'll have you covered on KSLSports.com and KSL News Radio. I know I was looking at my flights, looking to book some hotels, so we'll have you covered on the ground here on KSLSports.com. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Cougar Tracks podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Mitch_Harper. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Leave a rating and a review. Also, in the rating and reviews, ask your questions there too. And I'll pull some of the questions from your ratings and reviews and use them in a future podcast. I'll talk to you on Monday at high noon here on the Cougar Tracks podcast, and it's always powered by KSLSports.com.